person often looks for the cause of their tiredness anywhere but where it is actually hidden. They blame lack of sleep, hard work, other people who drain their strength. And sometimes that is true. But there is a far quieter and more insidious source of exhaustion that a person almost never considers: themselves. It is not others who steal most of their energy. They steal it from themselves day after day, in countless imperceptible ways that have become so habitual, they no longer notice them. Carl Gustav Jung understood that the human psyche holds an immense reserve of life force. He called it libido, meaning by it not only desire but the very energy of the soul. And this energy either flows freely, feeding life, creativity, relationships, growth, or it gets stuck, leaks out, and is squandered in the inner conflicts a person wages with themselves without realizing it. Jung would say that modern tiredness is most often not physical, but of the soul. It is the fatigue of an invisible war a person wages inside themselves day and night, knowing neither rest nor truce. This video is about 7 ways a person, with their own hands, steals energy from themselves. Not so they will blame themselves even more. Guilt itself is one of these ways. But so they can finally see where their strength is leaking and learn to seal these quiet leaks. Because whoever stops squandering themselves from within suddenly discovers that they had enough energy all along. They were simply giving it to the wrong place. Way 1. They live anywhere but in the present. The mind of an ordinary person is almost never here and now. It either endlessly replays the past, old conversations, mistakes, grievances, scenes that can no longer be changed, or it races anxiously into the future, rehearsing catastrophes that will most likely never happen. And this consumes enormous strength. Jung would say a person scatters their energy across time that does not exist. The past is gone. The future has not come. Only the present moment is real, and it is precisely there that the person is almost never present. They tire not from what they do, but from the fact that, doing one thing, they are mentally in 10 other places. Divided attention is divided energy, and divided energy always leaks away. Way 2. They please everyone and cannot say no. A huge part of a person's life force goes into meeting others' expectations, being liked, not disappointing, holding on to the approval of those around them. They say yes when everything in them wants to say no, take on what is not theirs, fear giving offense, apologize for what is not their fault. Jung saw fear behind this, the fear of being rejected, of losing acceptance, of not being good enough. And this fear makes a person betray themselves in small ways hundreds of times a day. Each such small self-betrayal costs energy, because inside the person a quiet rupture occurs each time between what they feel and what they do. Whoever lives for others' approval is doomed to constant fatigue, because pleasing everyone is impossible, and to try is to draw endlessly from oneself, receiving nothing in return. Way 3. They constantly maintain the mask. Jung called the persona the face a person shows the world, the role they play to be accepted. The persona is necessary, but the trouble is that many merge with it so completely that they play it without rest, even when alone with themselves. And maintaining the mask requires enormous, continuous expenditure of strength. A person is always watching themselves, controlling how they appear, hiding what they consider unworthy, portraying what is not in them. Jung would say it is like wearing heavy armor and never taking it off. It protects, but it also wears you down, because its weight is constant. And the most bitter part is that the longer a person wears the mask, the more tired they grow of a life that is not even theirs, because it is not they who live, but their role. Let us pause for a moment and picture how this looks in ordinary life. A person comes home from work exhausted, though physically they did almost nothing. They sat at a desk all day. So where does the tiredness come from? If we look honestly at their day, it turns out to have been a continuous chain of quiet leaks. In the morning, they replayed an unpleasant conversation from a week ago. Then they agreed to someone's request. That was a burden, and carried a dull irritation at themselves all day. At lunch, they scrolled through others' shining lives and felt a sting of envy and of their own insignificance. In the evening, they remembered a dozen unfinished tasks and felt the familiar heaviness. None of these movements seems large on its own, but together they drank more strength from them in a day than any hard physical labor. Jung would say that this person's body rested all day, while their soul knew not a moment of peace. Way 4. They wage war on their shadow. This is perhaps the deepest of all the ways. The shadow for Jung is everything in a person that they rejected and drove into the unconscious. Their anger, their desires, their weaknesses, their dark sides. And a person spends colossal energy keeping that door shut, not seeing, not feeling, not acknowledging what lives in their depths. But suppression does not destroy. It only requires constant effort, like holding underwater something that strives to surface. Jung said the more a person wars with their darkness, the harder it presses from within, and the more strength goes into that invisible struggle. Whoever has not made peace with their own shadow lives in a state of secret civil war, and that war drains them more surely than anything else. Way 5. They hold grievances and cannot forgive. Every unforgiven grievance is an open wound to which a person returns again and again in their mind, reliving the old pain as if it had just happened. They wage endless inner dialogues with those who wronged them, prove their rightness to people who have long been gone, carry within them an anger that poisons above all themselves. Jung understood that unforgiveness binds a person to the past and to the one who hurt them with an invisible but strong chain, and holding that chain takes strength. Forgiveness for Jung is not the justification of the other and not weakness. It is the freeing of oneself, the breaking of the chain, the return of energy a person spent years using to carry an old wound. Whoever does not forgive pays for another's act twice, once in pain and then all their life, in their energy. Way 6. They constantly compare themselves to others. In a world where others' lives are on display, a person ceaselessly measures themselves by another's yardstick. They look at others' successes, others' beauty, others' happiness, often a carefully curated shop window rather than reality, and feel inadequate. And this comparison steals energy in two ways at once. It breeds envy, which corrodes from within, and it devalues the person's own path, robbing them of joy in what they have. Jung would say that every person has their own unique road of individuation, their own inimitable pattern of destiny, and to measure it by another's ruler is to betray one's own uniqueness. Whoever is always looking at others loses sight of themselves, and along with themselves loses that strength, which is born only from fidelity to one's own path. Here it is worth mentioning a subtlety Jung understood deeply. Comparison steals energy not only when a person feels worse than others, but also when they feel better. For in both cases, they keep their worth on a scale where the other pan always holds someone else. The one who rises above others is as unfree as the one who diminishes beneath them, because both depend on constant measuring. And this ceaseless weighing of oneself against everyone around consumes an enormous, invisible strength. Jung would say true footing is born only when a person stops measuring themselves by another's yardstick altogether, and finds their center of gravity within, in fidelity to their own path. Whoever has found that inner footing no longer spends energy on endless comparison, because they no longer need to prove their worth, neither to others nor to themselves. Way 7. They leave behind a trail of the unfinished. Every postponed task, every unspoken word, every promise to oneself a person did not keep, every venture begun and abandoned, none of it disappears. Jung would say the unfinished continues to live in the psyche as an open loop, a quietly running background program that imperceptibly consumes energy, even when the person is not thinking of it. Dozens of such open loops hang within them at once, and together they create that vague sense of heaviness and fatigue whose cause a person cannot name. They are tired not from what they did, but from all that they did not do, and that keeps quietly drawing strength from the background of their awareness. The unfinished does not rest. It waits, and that waiting costs energy. Look closely at these 7 ways, and their common root reveals itself. All of them are forms of a person's rupture with themselves. The one who does not live in the present is torn between times. The one who pleases everyone is torn between themselves and others' expectations. The one who wears a mask is torn between who they are and who they pretend to be. The one who wars with their shadow is torn within their own soul. The one who does not forgive is chained to the past. The one who compares has lost themselves in another. The one who hoards the unfinished is scattered across dozens of half-done things. And everywhere the same mechanism. Energy leaks not outward but into the cracks within the person, into the places where they are not whole, where they war with themselves rather than live. That is precisely why Jung saw the path not in acquiring more energy, but in ceasing to lose it. For a person has enough strength to begin with. The only question is where it goes. And as soon as a person begins to close these inner leaks, they discover, to their surprise, that the tiredness they considered an inevitable part of life begins to recede. Not because they started doing less, but because they stopped warring with themselves while doing it. There is one more trait these 7 ways share that is worth naming plainly. Almost all of them happen automatically, outside of consciousness. A person does not consciously decide to replay the past, put on the mask, or compare themselves to someone. It happens on its own, out of an old, deeply ingrained habit, like breathing. And that is precisely why they grow so tired without understanding why. The leaks run in the background, below the level of their attention, around the clock. Jung would say that everything that remains unconscious rules a person and spends their strength without their knowledge. And so the first and most important step is not struggle, but the light of awareness. The moment a person first sees a leak, at the very instant it happens, it already loses part of its power, because what is made conscious ceases to act automatically. So how does a person seal these quiet leaks? Jung offered no simple tricks, but he pointed to a clear direction, and it begins with awareness. You cannot reclaim energy you lose unnoticed. First, you must see exactly where it is leaking. And so the first step is simply to observe yourself over a few days without judgment, noticing, there now my mind ran off into the past. There I said yes when I wanted to say no. There I put the mask on again. There I compared myself to someone again. This observation alone, without any struggle, already begins to return power to the person, because you cannot change what you do not see. It is important to understand, too, that sealing these inner leaks is not violence against oneself, and not a new form of struggle. If a person begins to furiously scold themselves for again drifting into the past, again putting on the mask, again feeling jealous of someone, they will only add one more leak to the old ones, because self-flagellation also devours energy, and greedily at that. Jung regarded human weaknesses with clear compassion and taught the same. Noticing a leak, one should not punish oneself, but gently, almost with curiosity, bring oneself back, to the present, to the truth, to oneself. It is precisely this gentleness that makes the work possible, because what is done out of compulsion and fear always exhausts, while what is done out of calm attention and acceptance nourishes. The leaks must be sealed the way one cares for something living, patiently without hatred, day after day. Against the first way, Jung would set the return to the present. Whenever a person notices that their mind has run off into the past or the future, they can gently bring themselves back here, to the breath, to the body, to what they are doing right now. The fullness of presence is not a technique, but a state in which all of a person's energy is gathered into one point, into the living moment, rather than scattered across non-existent time. And it is in that gathered presence that strength stops leaking and, for the first time, becomes available. Against pleasing and the mask, Jung would set authenticity, the courage to be oneself, imperfect, but real. Each time a person honestly says no where they would once have betrayed themselves for approval, they reclaim a piece of their strength. Each time they allow themselves to remove even part of the mask and be seen as they are, they stop paying for the performance that so wore them out. Authenticity saves colossal energy, Because being oneself requires no effort, while pretending requires it constantly. It is important to say that closing all these leaks at once is impossible, and there is no need for it. Jung understood that a person is not a machine you can fix with a single turn of a key. It is enough to begin with one. Let a person choose the leak that seems largest to them and work on that alone, for a week, a month, as long as it takes. Perhaps they will decide to catch themselves each time they please against their will, and, at least sometimes, say an honest no. Or to close one small unfinished task each evening, or catching themselves comparing, to gently return their gaze to their own path. Each sealed leak returns part of the strength, and the returned strength eases the work on the next. And so, step by step, a person gathers themselves back together, not by a heroic effort, but by quiet, patient attention to where their life is going. Against the war with the shadow, Jung would set integration. Not to suppress one's darkness and not to war with it, but to acknowledge it as part of oneself, to listen to it, to understand what it once protected. What is acknowledged and accepted ceases to press from within, and the energy that went for years into holding it down is finally released. Jung said a person becomes stronger not when they defeat their darkness, but when they make peace with it and make it an ally. Against grievances, he would set forgiveness as the freeing of oneself. Against comparison, fidelity to one's own path. And against the unfinished, either to complete it or to consciously and honestly let it go, closing the open loop so it stops quietly consuming strength in the background. And then, a quiet but profound change takes place. A person who has closed their inner leak suddenly feels a surge of strength they had not known for years, not because new energy came from somewhere, but because the old energy stopped leaking. They discover that they were like a vessel with many unnoticed cracks. However much you pour in, it empties all the same. And the point was not to pour in more, but to heal the cracks. And those cracks are nothing other than the places where the person was torn apart from themselves. It is worth understanding, too, why this matters, more than it seems at first glance. For the point is not merely about tiredness, nor about having a little more strength left by evening. The energy of the soul that Jung spoke of is what a person builds their very life from. From it is born all creativity, all love, all growth, all forward movement. And when this energy leaks for years into the cracks of inner wars, a person simply has none of it left for what they may have come into this world to do. They want to create, but are too tired. They want to love, but are emptied. They want to change, but have no strength even for the first step. And they blame it on age, on character, on circumstances, never suspecting that all the missing strength was theirs all along. They were simply giving it to the ghosts of the past, to others' approval, and to the war with themselves. That is why Jung saw the gathering of oneself, not merely as a path to calm, but as the return to a person of their own life. Whoever has closed their inner leaks receives back not only vigor, they receive back the ability to live fully, to spend their strength on what truly matters to them, rather than on invisible battles no one wins. And in this sense, guarding your energy is not selfishness and not care for comfort. It is fidelity to your own life, a refusal to squander it in vain where it yields neither fruit nor joy. Because in the end, all this energy a person spent on the war with themselves, on the past, on masks, on others' opinions, this is the energy of their life. It is that very strength they later lack for what truly matters, for love, for creativity, for those close to them, for their own growth, for the very joy of being alive. And it can be reclaimed not by adding anything from outside, but simply by ceasing to steal it from oneself. Jung would say that to become whole is to gather oneself into one out of all these ruptures, and that it is precisely in this wholeness that the calm, full energy is born, which cannot be begged from anyone and which you stop taking from yourself. Whoever has stopped warring with themselves feels for the first time in a long while that they are alive, because all their strength is finally with them, here in this moment, rather than scattered across battles that should long ago have been laid down. If this video resonated with you, If you recognized in it even one of your own quiet ways of stealing strength from yourself, write one word in the comments: presence. Leave a like so this conversation finds those who need it now. And subscribe to the channel. Here we go into the depths, toward ourselves, following Carl Jung.